Very good morning, all. My name is Stuart Bell. Welcome to this morning's webinar, Breaking Down Barriers, Democratising Planning and Portfolio Data for Collaborative Project Success. Really excited to be joined by a couple of industry leaders from both McLaren and Lendlease, one of those being a spotlight case study, as well as the head of innovation. I'll get you introduced to the panel before handing over to my colleague Alistair to provide a little bit of a scene set and context for today, before one of the key draws for me certainly is a spotlight and case study talk from Brendan Johnson, Director of Planning at McLaren Construction. For those of you that don't know Acumine, just very briefly, we're a strategic and transformational consultancy with a big focus on data in the built environment, and we work with a number of tier one contractor brands, providing and helping them provide business insight and support performance decisions at a project portfolio right up to a management and an executive level. And typically we're embedding as part of the contractors team, and we're an accelerator to the work that they do. I mentioned that we've got an esteemed set of speakers this morning.
Thanks, Stuart. To start off with, I was just going to provide some context in terms of, where we are as an industry and how did we get into this mess. But to position that from a personal perspective, I am, as I said, from a construction background. And when I first started out in my career, I was undertaking roles as a package manager, section manager, finishes manager, working my way up to construction manager and the like. And I got a lot of exposure to different ways of working, different people. And I progressed on through my career, as I said, into digital and data. But when I look back at my time working on site, what I realized is that I had a treasure trove of data available to me in the form of a construction program that I never really made full use of. My experience was that I would get given an updated PDF of the program. I would take some key milestones from that and I'd do my own look aheads. I'd give the planner back a drop line of where I thought we were at the end of a week. He'd update that back into Asta, and then otherwise we'd be colouring in drawings to mark up what we'd done, what we wanted to do the following weeks, and engaging with the supply chain in that way. But now, as I've gone through my career and really seen what exists under the hood and the power of modern data and analytics platforms, I've realized how much we weren't making use of back in those days, and how much value and potential data has in the successful delivery of projects across the construction industry. So hopefully the discussion today will help shine a bit more light on that and open up people's thinking to those treasure troves of data that exist in construction projects across the UK and wider. In terms of industry context, sorry, Stuart, just back one quickly. I think the construction industry is an incredibly challenging environment to operate in. As we all know, there's a lot of different factors to balance at any given time, and it isn't just things that are within our control. There's also things outside our control, like legislative compliance is just one example that you can see up there. But we're constantly being put under pressure to achieve increased levels of productivity and profitability to actually deliver what we've signed up to at the outset of a project. But it always feels like we're fighting a losing battle, that we're always managing an increasing amount of risk on our projects and facing pressures to deliver quality jobs so that we're not leaving behind legacy issues, but still deliver to a program that was set many years ago without necessarily a full, complete picture in front of us. The industry has many challenges to address, but our belief is that a key differentiator in the ability of a contractor to meet those challenges and excel in this environment is their ability to make informed decisions fast, and that's what we're really going to be talking about today. I think a bit more context around the construction data challenges that I started my career about the same time as this slide is focused on, and at that time it was the world of printing drawings, having drawing racks, things being transmitted via CDs. You have fax machines. Laptops were quite bulky, very slow, and the phone wasn't in your pocket, it was on a desk. But if you fast forward over the space of just over 20 years, things have changed dramatically. Between kind of the early 2000s and the 2010s, we were already seeing progression into the world of BIM. So we'd moved on from a few minor applications to people starting to engage with 3D models. Everybody had a mobile phone in their pocket at that stage. Everything was becoming more mobile, interactive, and the industry was rapidly digitizing, and we continued to move forward to today. And we're in a world where people are talking about AI, they've got virtual reality, people are engaging with 3D models in ways that weren't even really imaginable 10 years ago. The landscape has transformed, but I think one of the things that we haven't necessarily always got our hands around is the fact that in digitizing, we've created an extremely complex digital landscape where we've introduced an awful lot of different applications into our organizations to help us deliver these individual projects. So these applications that many of you will be familiar with have been introduced as part of making individual team members or functions more productive in their particular role. But what hasn't always necessarily been the case in introducing all of these applications into organizations is thought around how we're actually going to leverage the data that ends up being locked up in individual application silos. And that's what we believe there's huge opportunity in the industry to do, to move away from having Excel as the common kind of intermediary between all of these applications to moving to a more automated, intelligent way of working where the data in these applications is available at people's fingertips to make faster, better informed decisions. What Acumine do is that we work with clients to go on a journey, whether they're starting out from the very start point of having very siloed data and business processes, or whether they're further along and they've started to put a bit of structure around their data. They've started to run some pilot studies or case studies of how they can automate their reporting from these applications, or they're moving along to having more mature environments where they're using data from applications in a more mature way across the entire organization to what we see as the end of the journey, where you have an enterprise grade BI and data platform that's covering your entire technology stack and is providing multiple different views and perspectives on that data to help make everybody in the organization more effective in how they work. This is a journey that we're going on with multiple main contractors across the UK, but one in particular that we're proud of the work that we've been doing with is McLaren Construction, who we have quite a close working relationship with. A large part of their organization, from their IT teams to their individual delivery teams, and we're working with their internal resources and various different disciplines to transform their organization from a data perspective. And happy to hand over to Brendan Johnson, who's going to talk about specifically some of the work that we've been doing with McLaren around leveraging their program data.
Superb. Alistair, thank you very much indeed. Really good scene set there. Brendan, if I can ask you to unmute, and again, I will advance the slides when you're ready.
Okay, as I said, planning director for McLaren Construction. We are a building company. Yeah, McLaren was founded in 2001. Started back then, simple industrial buildings, quick turnover, low risk. But the company's fairly young, and as it was growing, we're getting into more complex projects, cutting carves around London, high-rise, hotels, data centres, industrial logistics, as I said, commercial, residential, some education, retail, student accommodation. So it's a breadth of work across the country. And then we've got to where we are now. So we're looking at some big projects, 220 million, the Excel expansion, stuff at King's Cross for Argent. So the business has got into a lot more complex projects than when I joined. It was starting that journey about 10 years ago. Yeah, so I said I started 10 years ago. I was brought into, so up until then we had a few planners doing tenders, and generally the site teams could manage themselves, and they did. They knew what they were doing with the industrial. They would start and they'd be building these jobs 30 weeks. But the more complex, I joined, I met there was 4 regional directors for each part of the business, and each one of them, the message was they didn't trust what they were being told about program. So met the whole team, and then met the planning team. There was about 8 of us at the beginning. We're up to about 30 people now. Yeah, so the big decision back then was very weak planning procedures. That was nothing against the guys that were there. They were working very hard, but the business needed to support them. So one of my biggest decisions was about progress reporting, and I had a big debate from a company that wasn't doing weekly reports, or they were doing some jagged lines for monthly reports. Was it a step too far to introduce a weekly progress in? So proper linked up programs, baselines, locked down and rescheduled every week. I decided to go weekly, and that was the best decision I ever made, because it quite quickly took grounds in the business. People were looking for their reports weekly. I did back then, a simple Excel macro that someone prepared for me. It did the job. That macro opened up each program in succession and dumped it into an Excel report. Quite quickly became known as the red report because of delays on most of the jobs. That's the nature of our business. But people started to take notice, started to trust what the program was telling them. And that was really the springboard for the planning team within McLaren. I would say we start back 2015, that was my 10 years ago. 22, 23, McLaren has we became bigger. We're heading up for the £1 billion turnover. New people have come in from more tier 1 companies. We're on that journey now where digital has become a big hold within the business. So we're using things like Dalux, A-Sites, and the IT department has become more developed, and that's probably where Daniel comes in with his team. So for me, about 2024, the business is already on a digital journey. I then met Daniel and the team at Acumine, and it was time to give up my trusty Excel macro, which has been the bane of my life, but probably the most successful of my life, to look at Power BI. The company's going down that business. The Microsoft Fabric had been introduced, and company's been gaining pace over the last few years, and with other industries. My trusted macros being locked out by Microsoft themselves. I've been told by our IT manager it's going to disappear, so I had to do something. Daniel and the team came in. At the same time, we've always used Asta. We do some projects in P6, but majority in Asta. The two came together because we need to get Asta on a cloud-based, more robust system. We're going through the change to Asta Vision at the moment, and in tandem with that, we're going for the Power BI in the background to produce the reports. Daniel and the team came on board, and I think it's fair to say Acumine knew what they were doing. They knew what I wanted, and a few meetings with my team as to get what we wanted as a business, and reacted quite quickly. We're just at the stage now, we have the Power BI reporting. Asta Vision is now being rolled out to the business, and in the next few months, I'm hoping to see a sea change of everybody looking at the Power BI reports. And that's probably our journey to date. Here you see some examples of what Daniel and the team at Acumine have done for me. It's a combined portfolio, which you're looking at now. So it tells me every job. So in our business, we have go for the contract program and construction program. We lock down the contract program and do our own peer review tests, and then we go into a weekly reporting cycle. And key for me is end variance, what I've grown up with. But more and more importantly was the activity count. So previous company have been involved with EVM, SPI. There's a lot of work into that, I believe. I think the activity count gives, for what I want, a quick look at the project. So end variance, what's the overall slippage? Activity count, what's stacking up on me? Those two I look at very closely every week. And added features that Daniel's brought in is the schedule quality, which we do at the peer review using Asta's built in, but this does it automatically when it comes in. And our notes, and so for the managers, they can hover over their charts, but for the planners and more detailed people, they can go into the detail and drill down. I think probably we'll just step through some of these now, but that's the portfolio view. So Gantt chart for the overall to match the front portfolio. Again, more Gantt charts, but we can go more specific into the program and drill down there for WIP and different types of targets within the Gantt charts. this and the milestone slippage. Acumine have added in more features for me. I used to just measure the overall summary and the completion milestones. Now we can have a number of key milestones which we measure for a project. Next one. The all-important S-curve. We were doing it on some projects, but it's a bit cumbersome. This is very fast now, and as well as doing it for the overall project, we've honed in on a consistent code library for all the projects, which matches up with our IFS system, which is our accounting system. Probably more to come out of that yet, but at the moment we're not measuring money. It's purely activity count, number of activities done against number planned. You see the banana there, as we call it, the earliest possible, latest possible. Hopefully we keep in the middle. And so that's the standard S-curve. This was a very nice feature that Daniel added in. We give him a bit to think about on this one, didn't we, Daniel? It's what we've done here, the last 10 weeks activity count, we've done a trend line just to project if we carry on at that sort of rate of output. Where does that take us? So it's the activity status for the subcritical paths, the next critical path, work in progress. Again, more drilling down the activity detail from the program. There's quite a lot of views. I'll be honest, I haven't used them all in earnest yet. We're just getting into that stage, and I'm sure there's a lot of questions going to come because there's a lot of detail. Some of our managers love the detail, some just want the high level, so it caters for all. And this is the metrics, the schedule health, which is very useful because we do check it at the beginning, but as you go through a project, links get broken, and it just keeps a constant check that we got the quality of the program going forward. If not, do a bit of a deep dive. What next? So we're on that stage now. So guys have been trained in Asta Vision last week and this week. We're rolling that out. The guys will be uploading their programs. It will be spread through the business from director down to managers, commercial managers on the projects, and then we keep reviewing it and improve as we go. And I'm sure there will be challenges and there will be things to look at.
Fantastic, Brendan. Thank you very much. Can I just ask a quick question of you? How much did it help that you, in the early days, implemented your VBA Excel reporting and moved to that weekly reporting to instill a discipline? We know that change is hard, and culturally, bringing people on the journey with you is very important.
Yeah, I think, as I said, that was the best decision I ever made. It was twofold. One, it drove the planners not to be lazy, because I did inherit a lot of no-end links. The quality of the schedules wasn't the best because they were rushed. So it drove the planners to make sure the quality was there, because they knew they were going to get their peer reviews and they couldn't cut corners. Not that they all did, it's just pressures of work. They were doing a lot of work. But then it also helped drive it through the managers. And with the planners doing the quality, they were able on a weekly basis get the managers looking at the program. And there's some very clever PDs, project managers out there. They start interrogating, because we were doing some Asta training in the meantime, and they started to get a better understanding of critical path, doing filters, what they could look at if they targeted certain areas. So that all came from doing the weekly progress report. And then it worked, either they got an interest in it, or it came from coming from the top down, where they were getting pressured and asked, why is this late? And they started looking at it more. It just drove an understanding of program through the business a lot better than it had been before. And then with that became the trust, and the trust, it sort of linked into forecast meetings, so site forecast meetings, and managing director main board program reviews. I'd say to this day, it's predominantly the programs are trusted. There's the odd question, which is good, challenge is good. But on the whole, people trust what they're being shown now. But there will question as well with the knowledge.
Brilliant. And you mentioned there top down, with your director hat on and thinking about your colleagues at a board level. How has this journey been for the board in terms of access to information? And appreciating you're still on that journey with A-Site, Dalux, and now Asta towards from Powerproject to Vision. Are you all talking the same language now?
Yeah, they are. And it's actually one of the directors called it the red report because he kept getting a bit of a dog in that is. I set some parameters and I thought if a job's a day late, it goes red. And maybe that was a bit harsh, but it worked because the directors start calling it the red report now. And it became Brendan's red report every week when they were getting a dog in. But it's worked well. And they have a bit of a laugh about it, but they do trust it. They do look at it and they do action what it's been shown or question it. Which is that's what it's all about. People need to trust the data they're getting, or if they don't, question it and see what can be done about it as it happens, not waiting for months later when they've got a problem. That construction moves very fast. If you don't address it quickly, it'll go out of hand and you will lose control.
Super. You mentioned my colleague Dan. Dan, I'll ask you to unmute momentarily, just while I bring in a picture of Dan Blackman at McLaren. From your perspective, Dan, how did the project run from kind of initial brief design to where we are today?
Well, I think before we get into the detail of Brendan's projects, it's obviously important to set the scene. And from the outset of working with McLaren over the past few years, it's safe to say that they've definitely been a very forward-thinking organisation. They're on a massive growth trajectory, but investing in the right people, the right systems, the right processes. In terms of the background to Brendan's projects, a lot of the foundations have been put in place. Acumine have played some part in that, but equally, like I've said, their internal teams and processes have been on that journey as well to help them prepare for becoming ultimately a tier one contractor. In terms of Brendan's project, I think Brendan, as he alluded to, appreciated some of the experience that we brought to the table in terms of other similar work we delivered for other contractors. Yes, some of the intellectual property that we were able to transfer across into the McLaren environment has just helped to accelerate his journey. Definitely benefiting from Asta Vision. Gone are the days of trying to export data from Asta Powerproject as a standalone application, or trying to export data through add-ons and macros to various databases or Excel-based reports. So certainly having a modern platform application in Asta Vision allows us easy access to that data, and then that opens up a new world of opportunities for us in terms of how we utilize that data in terms of dashboards and reports, but also how we bring that data together with other data sets. Brendan briefly alluded to future potential with linking up IFS commercial and financial data, but there's so many more opportunities in terms of how we can bring data together from across the project lifecycle.
Thank you, Dan. And Brendan, thank you so much for that. I would just end the slideshow here. And Matt, what's it been like at Lendlease that you've observed?
Yeah, it's a couple of things. I suppose if I speak from a planning perspective first, which is not my discipline expertise and I work really close with, and then I'll lump back into the detail focus. I think what's interesting for us with the main contracting hat on as an industry is the importance planning is going to take during our PCSA phases. I'm sure McLaren and like many main contractors are experiencing the same as we are in terms of being appointed under long-term pre-contract service agreements. And it's in that phase where planning in terms of really strategically understanding how we're going to deliver a project comes to its fore. I think making sure that we can give people really tangible data sets to make decisions. Like your LinkedIn post of those oranges, Stuart, that was brilliant, that was. Giving people really tangible outputs for decision-making processes is critical, because if we're not clear in those moments, then you're going to sign up to bad jobs. When you sign up to bad jobs, it's really tough for everybody on the job. And as Brendan said really accurately, when it gets out of control, it gets out of control really quickly. I think second to that, then, from a general industry perspective, there is so much information now flowing through. The ability to decipher that and make really accurate decisions in a timely manner is probably one of the biggest challenges we're really facing. And as a function, time and cost, those two things are some of the most important factors to consider. So planning is key to it. So yeah, I think at the moment, in hearing what we've got there and what I'm seeing particularly, and I know we're in conversations with Acumine and really understanding your system, is how do you make it easy for people to make decisions? Now, the red report, we've got the same equivalents. I think it's important to be able to put those decisions and the clarity of that in front of people's faces to make clear decision. That's it. That's good.
Thanks, Matt. Mark?
Oh, it's a very familiar journey. Brendan, well done. It's a really familiar journey for me. I came over to Australia in 2011, working on one project, and then over the course of a number of years, moved from one project to business unit to one of our contractors in the group to then head up the whole group. And I understand how hard it is. You're not only making choices about new systems, you're designing new processes, you are bringing people on board. It's a real journey. So well done, Brendan.
And Brendan, just looking back, you highlighted the Red Report, VA and Excel. Even before then in your career, give us a taste of what happened and looking back with the benefit of hindsight, what were the impact of not availing of information? And were there any kind of real pivotal moments when IT supported you, came knocking on your door to say, here's some technology that might really pivot you towards the future and put your finger on the pulse?
I see the founder there, Mr. Richard Ormrod's in the audience there. So I remember him knocking on our door, coming across with this new piece of software. It was a gem version back then, Powerproject. I think that's probably the start of the digital world for planning for me. Prior to that, it was rotary pens. I'm going back 39, 40 years now. It was rotary pens. If anyone asked me to change the program, you've got no chance, mate. But the digital then was start Powerproject and critical path analysis, speeding up. And we've been on that journey back into days with the infrastructure with Costain. There was a bigger company, bigger infrastructure projects, dealing in value management. I've seen that. It has benefits, but one guy said to me on a project there, how would you improve it? He said, stop it, because people aren't looking out of the window. They're just looking at dashboards and too much info. You've got to get info that makes a difference. And I think that's back 10 years ago. It was a simple macro, but it told me where the projects were. And I think that's been key with what I've been doing with Daniel and Acumine is it's still got to be, it's got to be quick, but it's got to be simple for people to understand because they lose interest. People are so busy, they don't have the time to understand stuff unless it's quick or you can explain it to them quick. Attention spans are very short in construction, I find. Yes, there are some people of mega detail, but the majority, they're busy guys. They've got emails, they've got drawings, they've got subcontractors coming out. They need quick responses. And clients want quick responses. They won't wait for a week or two anymore. It's next day.
Yeah. And Matt, how about with your architectural background, your digital engineering background, what have you witnessed and what's been pivotal for businesses that you've worked in?
I think I'll probably touch on this a bit more as we go into the questions. It's moving away from a quantitative assessment of the amount of information people have got into more a qualitative review. And I think that's so important, that is, because particularly from a design perspective, how many times do we receive complete design information to find out it's not really complete? And how many times does that have an impact? And at what level does that have an impact? And what I see in the industry at the moment is an evolution going on right now around the understanding of how you qualify what you've got and when you've got it. I'm sure we'll touch on that stuff. But again, it's about putting that in front of people. Because if I've got 90% of a suite of information, but the 10% is critical to 6 other parts of the building, which are critical to the delivery end date of the job, how do we know that? And how do we then empower the people who are responsible for that information to get the answers they need to keep us on program? So I think, without being overly complicated about it, yeah, it's quality as well as the quantity of the information. That's the big shift I'm seeing now with the amount of data available to us. It's to dig a little bit deeper and look at the quality of it.
Mark, from your perspective, what have you witnessed? And there's a lot of focus put on that original baseline pre-construction program and held up, and sometimes in the olden days would have pinned to the portal cabin wall for us to review. What's your reflection on the historical perspective and how the culture of planning and how technology have supported change in that cultural review?
I think I quite often, because I've worked on 4 continents and I've seen construction projects and tender teams in so many different situations. And people ask me this question, what are the parallels I can see of who does what best and who has the best practice? And I'll be honest, I see the full spectrum of maturity around planning just about every part of the world I've touched and just about every industry I've touched. I'm still yet to see that consistent view of what planning is and what it does for us as an industry. And you do see people who have a really good understanding of just how important it is, and it's right next to cost at the top of the table in terms of decision making. But equally, you will see so many teams where, oh yeah, program, we've got one of those somewhere, or we're still not quite up to speed with the program, not quite sure what it says, and we don't believe it, as Brendan said earlier, that we don't trust the program, we don't use it. So you see that full spectrum. But it's great when you walk into those teams where they have that hunger to improve, or that hunger for more, or they want to do something different, they want to do something better, and you can help them understand how to get the best out of running a program well and getting it right from the start. I mean, some of the stuff that Matt's just been talking about, I guess one thing I am starting to see, particularly on the larger projects, is that, and some of the business leaders I've spoken to, there is a very growing, I wouldn't say, is it wide? Yeah, I'm not sure. But there's a growing awareness that some of the bigger decisions that are made in the pre-construction stage, as far back as concept, are really pivotal. And if we don't get those right, and if we're making decisions that, oh, we're not quite sure what to do here, we'll leave it to the contractor, we'll leave it till after tender stage, then that's when, that's when projects really fall into trouble. But so I think, yeah, there's maybe amongst some quarters a really growing understanding of around what Matt was talking about in terms of its importance from the start, rather than just in the construction phase. Yeah.
Can I come back just on one point, Stuart, and then I reckon, Brendan, I'd be fascinated to see how McLaren approach in this as well. Not to steal any ideas or anything, but I do think you asked about the historical shift and the kind of where we were and where we're at. I suppose so back in architecture, God, I used to get really frustrated with contractors because they'd be so aggressive with me about delivering information. And then as I transitioned into main contracting and I sat on some of our project sites and I was really in the detail of it, managing the design outputs at the time, I definitely understood it. And what I'm seeing as a change at the moment is, if I go back 10 years or 12 to 15 years ago, a lot of the conversations had around planning information, around portfolio and data and how are we getting on with the program, was done at long range or medium range level. So it was done over a quarter or against the main overall program cycle. Then what happened behind the scenes was you end up having a massive fight basically with people who are on the project, with lots of construction based detail in short range focus worlds. They were short range focused, and that's where all this detail was happening. And that's the shift I'm seeing from a planning perspective that's happening right now, is that the evolution, the connectivity of the short range accountable nature of what's in that short range programming world is now being directly connected to the medium and the long range program, which means you can see the more tangible benefits. There used to be such a knowledge or almost like a vacuum gap, and you'd be retained within individuals, particularly construction management. Whereas now that's becoming more democratized, it's been shared through and into the medium and the long range. And the only equivalent I could say on this is, if I look outside the industry, which is what triggered me when you were talking with Mark, outside the industry, my daughter's got her own little business. She orders unbelievable amount of stuff. So I'm working from home today, which means I'm likely to be interrupted by like an Amazon delivery. I guarantee it, because the amount of stuff that comes through our door in parcel packages. And I can't imagine what she would think if she didn't know where that parcel was at any moment in time. But the person who's updating the location is the person on the ground who's the driver. And it's that short range activity planning piece, which I look at the industry and I go, I think that's a huge opportunity. I think that's what I'm watching is shifting. And again, it's probably, if I can, it's probably a question for Brendan from your perspective in planning, is going, I see short range as an opportunity. Do you think that's right? And then are you seeing that from your expertise?
Just to go back, you mentioned about PCSA. I'd say about 70 or 80% of our jobs are PCSA 2-stage. So we have, over the last few years, probably the last 10 years, a focus on design, leading to procurement, leading on the work on site. I visit a lot of jobs, good and bad. Unfortunately, I visit quite a few bad ones. And when you get to the root of it, it's mostly design and delivery and the team not understanding together what they were doing and why. So that's the main focus. And the short term, yes, at the moment I focus the planners because they're not individual on all jobs. Some jobs there's a planner, sometimes they're not. I focus them on to getting the big picture, and then the short term comes out of your weekly progress, and you're seeing where the shifts are going, and that with the team should give you the short term. But yeah, I can see where your Amazon analogy is coming from, and AI, that's to come. So that will make the difference when you know what's turning up on everything.
I certainly see the growing awareness of that needing to have both. I refer to them as strategic plans and production plans. So you've got that strategic view for modeling your delivery strategy so that you can get stuff to the right place at the right time in terms of enabling work to start. And then you've got a different view, which is what you're describing, Matt, which is the short-term production planning view, which is what am I doing day to day? Now that my work can start in this area, what do I need to be able to do that work in that area? And yeah, there is that growing awareness of needing both. I still do see that the full understanding around the necessity for both isn't quite there, but I do see it also causing a bit of confusion. One thing I'm seeing more and more, like having real-time performance data and short-term planning is very important, and it's only going to become more important in time. And whether or not we'll get onto some of the questions later on, I'm not quite sure if we're going to have time, but I can explain why later. But at the moment, I think the focus is a little bit too skewed towards performance reporting and not necessarily on the underlying reliability of the forecast. And I don't know whether that makes sense to everybody in the room or not, or whether I'm saying stuff that I'm teaching granny to suck eggs. But essentially, there's no point reporting performance against a program if it's not reliable. Right? Anybody can throw a program together and make it look like a Gantt chart, and two programs side by side to the sort of casual eye will look like programs, right? But one will be reliable and one wouldn't. And I think as an industry, and I'm hoping that we can maybe even work with Acumine to do this on some ideas that we've had for a while, is to give people a true view on that reliability, how reliable the forward forecast is. And I'm not talking about DCMA checks, which tell you how integral or how connected the network is. I'm talking about how reliable the program is for forecasting the works that need to be done with a well thought out delivery strategy. I think that's possibly something that we can work towards as a group of individuals. I think we can help influence that awareness and that understanding, perhaps with technology helping us to give people that view.
When I started in the industry in the 90s, I think Salford University, their Construct IT Centre of Excellence just kicked off, and one of my colleagues was in the first cohort. He came back with a load of documentation, and the headline process that he said we could cookie cutter and lay this over any project to prove that it's not unique is it's a headline process of plan, win, do, review. The review bit at the end, I think, there is so important now because we can capture this kind of time series data of actual. And I think that's what we've just been discussing there. We can program forward, we can layer in the actual performance, and then when we get to the review stage, is looking more predictive way of where maybe gateways hadn't been hit.
I guess just to touch on complexity for a second, because I know that's something that you've talked about in the past, but like having a view on how you're going to finish a project and have a program for finishing a relatively simple project is very different to doing that on a complex project. And it's very hard to see through that complexity for most normal humans. Any planners in the room here will be able to read the green matrix, but most people can't.
Cheers, Mark. Yeah, thanks. Alistair, Dan, my next kind of question or theme really was around lead indicator. And I'm saying this as Acumine leaning into a range of different contractors, different shapes and sizes. What are the key kind of data points or things that we're being requested? Perhaps top three.
Yeah, from our perspective, there's a lot of value to be had in obviously analysing schedule and program data, but in terms of predicting project performance and having an idea of those lead indicators that would give insight into how the project is ultimately going to be delivered, whether it's going to be delivered on time, on budget, to the required quality. It's all about having that holistic data set, combining program data with data from the turnstiles on site, for example. Are we getting enough people on site? Are we getting the right trades on site at the right time? It's not just about is there enough people on site? Is potentially there might be too many people on site getting in each other's ways, potentially have coordination issues. We've heard a theme around getting the design right and having design delivered at the right time. So what are the lead indicators from that perspective that might indicate, are we going to have knock-on effects with the program? Same for quality as well. Looking at snagging data, for example, are we being proactive in monitoring the quality of the project, and are we closing out any quality actions in a timely manner? Yeah, for me, it's there's a lot to be gained from looking at scheduled data, but I think you have to look at project data a little bit more holistically to really get a true sense of those lead indicators that perhaps you're referring to there, Stuart.
Yeah, thanks, Dan. Matt, I think you were going to come in there as well.
Yeah, it was just for me. I wouldn't have a top three. I'd just have a top one if I was going to go. Obviously, there's loads in place which I'd always keep, but the one I think that's going to be instrumental for us going forward is the TIDP, MIDP, MIDIP world. I think understanding at front end quantity of information and the quality of that information as it goes through is going to be absolutely essential, particularly as you consider the move that we have towards offsite, the move towards productization, and the requirement for information to be managed as such. I think before we go into that, that's the biggest one for me.
Yeah, thank you. Really interesting, actually. Brendan, not to put you on the spot, but I came from a business that was a digital handover and soft landing specialist on major private and public sector jobs. And there was a lot of focus always put on construction program and the coordination of the physical construction project, but not on the digital engineering tasks necessarily. And I think what Matt's alluding to there is tracking all of the documented and digital deliverables alongside the construction program. Does that hit your door? Do your BIM and information management team engage around the similar tooling to yourself, creating and overseeing your planning function?
It is linking through more and more. Probably not so much in offsite and that as yet. I see mixed response with offsite. Some projects think it's great, some it's just not working. It's bespoke projects, but more digital. So a site, number of drawings, that's linking through. The model is becoming more important for linking the information to what we're building, and things like Synchro, Asta BIM, they're getting more of a grounding. And soft landings for government projects, that is something we have to look at, and people are getting more aware of what they've got to hand over, and I think the Building Safety Act is having a lot more influence on that as well. It's not just build it and dump and run. You've got to think of the whole process before you start with the gateways, and then as you're finishing, you've got to think about it. So that is having a lot more effect on it. Just
I noticed we're on the last kind of home run now, last 5 minutes. Just on that last one, Building Safety Act. Anything as significant as that comes into the industry will tend to be owned by a function to assess its impact and approach of implementation. But where are McLaren at in terms of, again, a shared understanding, sitting down with all parties internally in terms of delivery to understand the coordination, collaboration needed around decision to hit those gateways?
It's been on our radar for a couple of years. Before it started, we have a team dedicated to it within the business, and it's the whole team effort, and getting ready for the gateways has got to be a combination of design, subcontractors and main contractor getting ready, because you virtually have to be designed before you get the gateway approval, and then you've got to know what you're delivering and stick to it. It's a big factor, and I think it's a big cost within the high-rise HRB buildings, and you've got to be on it or it'll just stall and you'll be starting again. Those long periods we're getting at the moment that should improve will be even longer if you've got to go through it again because you haven't worked together.
Yeah, brilliant. Matt, anything else to add to that?
Yeah, what we're doing from BCA, it's painful as the kick everybody needed, and obviously for relevant reasons. I do think what's interesting about the BSA window is that if you look at the shift now, again, it's that I'm going to be really obsessive over the information strategy and the completion of design information and the planning of that. But I'd also consider that from a planning perspective and from a data perspective, this is about money as well. So if you take the BSA Gateway to 12 weeks, it's about 22. And I heard someone even say longer the other day that it's taking to get through this gateway. So if you think from a developer's perspective, we're placing costs into the start of a project, and we're having to go through a significant expense and payment to get to the end game. of being able to appoint and place contracts and start on site. That is a lot of outlay. And I think time to get that done is something that we need to be hugely focused on, which again is around, is the information there? Is it correct? Is it on time? And that is massively complex, thousands of pieces of information being collected, organized and submitted, and how that's structured from a delivery planning particularly is key. So I think, I'm banging that MIDP drum again. Yeah.
Cheers, Matt. Alistair, I think you might have a question from the floor, from the group. I could see a light pop up.
Yeah, we've had 2 questions through. So the first one was just wanting to understand what the best approach is to managing the program and program data when mid-project it's reset. How do you manage that from an activity day count perspective, and does it cause any challenges in terms of data analysis? I can pick that one up if nobody else wants to jump in, but I think typically that is a business process challenge. If you are going to reset a program midway through, it has to go through a robust governance kind of process and exercise. It has to go through a deep dive, making sure that it isn't a knee-jerk reaction. If you are going to re-baseline and reset the counters, that you're confident that the plan will deliver in the end. So from a data perspective, that there's lots that we can do. We can show how the individual tasks have moved, the shift in profile, but ultimately it comes down to having confidence that the plan, the methodology is robust enough to achieve those overall project outcomes, I'd say.
Was there one more question there?
Yeah, quite a technical one around the forecast, the straight line that was added onto the McLaren S-curve, just around how that's done.
My recommendation, because I will be following up with everybody who's attended today, is that we'll provide a written response for that. I'm going to run around. I'm going to start with Mark. We're going to look forward to the future. Are we going to all be controlled, and is this planning function and reporting going to be controlled by AI agents? Will we just be popping our feet up on the desk and letting the bots do their work? Go.
No, we're not going to be controlled by them. We're going to be assisted by them, hopefully, if the technology develops more than it currently has. I'll keep it short. There you go.
Thank you. Assisted intelligence. I like it. Brendan, but what's your crystal ball of the future saying about where technology is going to end up?
I think I'm with Mark, but I think I did used to think I'd be retired before that all comes in, but the speed it's happening at the moment, I might not. I am seeing a lot of changes coming very fast, and we've just got to be careful that we can keep up with it.
Yeah, I think we've got the bones of the next in this series. Matt?
I think, sorry, just quickly, one thing I will say as a cue for anybody in the audience is think about how the underlying processes will change as the new technology develops. Don't think about maintaining the existing processes as the technology develops. Processes will change as well as tech.
Sage advice, thank you. Matt?
Literally just had the door knock. Genuinely, it's an Amazon delivery parcel right now. Can't believe it. Look, I think we're all doomed. Yeah, no way. I'm not joking. I do think AI is going to absolutely revolutionize everything, and I think it's going to significantly change what we do and how we operate. It will affect everybody's roles and jobs in that sense, but that's just change. It's life, and I think there'll be huge opportunities in it. I would only say there's one area I'm really excited about, and that is how are we connecting to product as well in the process, and how are we starting to be able to select product off people's shelves with all the attributable data, planning, logistics, safety, and how that then empowers us to make really powerful decisions. I think that's the exciting space.
Cool. Run and get that parcel. Thank you, Matt. Dan, I'll end on you because we haven't focused too much. What will advances in technology mean to Acumine, or through your lens on the industry?
Yeah, I think what they mean for Acumine is that we're very much focused on helping organisations prepare for that future, laying the right foundations, ensuring that businesses have the right processes in place, as Mark referred to, in terms of preparing for that future. If I could leave a final thought with everybody, invest in a data platform if you're not looking in that space already. Invest in good quality data, the right people and the right processes.
Oh, brilliant. Look, thank you firstly to our speakers, Brendan for the case study, the preparation, Matt similarly for your input and insight, notably in that digital engineering design realm. And Mark for staying up so late. I'm both really appreciative, but equally very jealous. In the pre-call, Mark told us, because he's in Australia, how lovely and warm it is down there at the moment, and how with the future of AI, he can just sit on the beach and do his job, which is wonderful. My colleagues, Dan and Alistair, well done. It's our inaugural webinar, and the genie's out the bottle now. We've got something that we've created, and hopefully to all of you that have joined today, please do get engaged in the discussion and the debate. We'd love to hear more opinions. Please let us know if you want to learn a little bit more about how we work. We'd love to understand your specific circumstance, and obviously get into a dialogue around how we could maybe support your transformation or even your tactical need, so that you can start moving forward. And just a point to say, we do have, in terms of our platform approach, it's all about performance decisions and build intelligence as a platform. We're looking at how do we create application accelerators, how do we create a common data model for all the common construction applications that these performance decisions are based on. So initially, the first iteration at a point of maturity is about presenting those lead indicator information at a project portfolio up to an executive level, but with analytical level detail and insight behind. And then as we move forward, it's all about, once you build provenance in that data, how do we then use and exploit that and federate it with lots of different application. And specifically today, we talked about real world performance feedback onto projects, in order that we can then look at a world of active and data analytics. We'll end there. Thank you very much for joining once again. We will be sending out the recording over the next few days. And if there are more questions, do come back to us. There are my details for you. Many thanks.